Now to tonight's guest, Kristinn Hrafnsson is an Icelandic investigative journalist who's become the public face of Wikileaks since Julian Assange's activities have been restricted by legal threats. He's in Australia for an Intelligence Squared debate. Wikileaks is a force for good. He'll be debating Gareth Evans, among others, and he'll be giving public lectures in Sydney, Melbourne and Brisbane over the next week. He was in our Sydney studio just a short time ago. Kristinn Hrafnsson, thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
The US federal grand jury will resume its hearings overnight Australian time, trying to establish a direct link between the whistleblower Private Bradley Manning and Julian Assange and Wikileaks. What are the implications of that grand jury that's sitting right now?
Well, they're obviously trying to build a case against Julian, trying to establish a connection between him and Bradley Manning. He was accused of being the whistleblower leaking these documents to Wikileaks. We have no idea whether he is the person who leaked the documents. As Julian has said, he first heard the name Bradley Manning last spring when the reports came out of his arrest. The same applies to me.
So to your knowledge, no one in Wikileaks, Julian Assange included, had a direct conversation, internet, chat room, any kind of conversation with Bradley Manning?
I had no knowledge of that. But I must say about the young soldier that if he is indeed the source of this material, he is a hero in my mind. And the treatment in the US of this young man is quite outrageous. He's been almost for a year in solitary confinement for 23 out of 24 hours a day. In isolation, he's been subjected to being stripped, to sleep deprivation, and it's a form of torture. So it's quite outrageous how he has been treated.
Would it have been wrong to have a conversation with him?
Well, it depends on how you look at it. Is it wrong for journalists to have a conversation with their sources?
Well, this is precisely because the identity of perhaps the most famous whistleblower of all time, Deep Throat, who was the whistleblower in the Watergate scandal that led to the downfall of Richard Nixon, was known to the journalists involved. So I'm wondering, why would it be different in this case for Julian Assange or anyone in Wikileaks to have had a conversation with the whistleblower?
Well, inherently there's nothing wrong with that, but the technology that Wikileaks is based on and the idea of the best protection for the sources is not knowing their identity. So that is the idea that Wikileaks is based on, for anonymous submission by whistleblower to the organization. And as I say, the best protection that the organization can give whistleblower is not knowing who they are.
Nonetheless, the grand jury is trying to establish this link, and the one thing we know that they have is the chat log of Bradley Manning's dialogue with the hacker, Adrian Lamo, in which Manning says, "I've developed a relationship with Assange." Is it Assange's case that Manning was simply big-noting himself here?
Well, the chat logs are very interesting to read. As I say, if he is the source of this material, it's interesting to read in the chat log what his motives were. He is being profiled as a disturbed man in the media in the States, which is quite interesting. They are quite overlooking the fact that he seems to have been quite distressed with his job in the military and what it stood for in Iraq, how innocent people were arrested, etc. So his motives, which are apparent in these logs, have been quite overlooked.
But you're happy to refer to what he's saying in the logs about his motives. What about where he says he had a relationship with Julian Assange?
Well, I mean, I don't know what to make of that, actually. He's in a difficult position, and we have to be careful with what we say about this young man.
The Wikileaks help desk does have an anonymous chat facility. Is it possible that using that, Julian Assange could have had an online chat with him, but he was anonymous at the time?
Well, I mean, everything is possible in that respect. I mean, there have been anonymous discussions with people. I mean, people need sometimes some assistance with technological approaches.
But by using that chat facility, do the people at Wikileaks and possibly Assange himself have conversations with people identifying as sources with particular material, perhaps saying, you know, I've got a pile of very important secret documents?
Well, I mean, we don't know actually what people identity are and what they are willing to do, but
with the anonymous sources, you can have this kind of conversation, can you?
That's technically possible, yes.
But it could have been possible in this case, because I mean, this is what the US investigators are trying to uncover. In fact, they're looking for everything. They've gone for tweets, emails, chat logs of every different kind. I mean, is it possible to keep anything secret from the investigators of a powerful government like the United States?
This shows how desperate the investigation is. I mean, they are throwing out a big fish net and asking for Twitter accounts information from people who have been volunteering for the organization, who are loosely connected to it. Seems to be an act of desperation and the willingness of reaching quite far in going after the organization and Julian Assange.
And of course, he must be under incredible pressure at the moment. You've been living with him just outside London until you've come here. I suspect you were staying in the same house with him until then. Can you tell us what his state of mind is? How is he coping with this immense pressure to be the centre of an investigation that's trying to pin him down in the United States, an extradition hearing going on in Britain to take him back to Sweden and so on? How's he handling the pressure?
He's handling the pressure very well. He is holding out well. He has a strong personality and strong convictions. He believes in what he is doing. He's an intelligent guy. He's been holding out pretty well. Reports
of serious tensions in that household, truth or exaggerations?
Exaggerations.
Now, the other legal minefield we just mentioned that Julian Assange has to go through is his appeal against extradition to Sweden. Can you explain for us, first of all, why he shouldn't face trial to clear his name on these sexual misconduct charges in Sweden?
Well, one thing to start with, it's important to keep in mind that he hasn't been charged with anything. These are allegations that are being investigated. It's very clear, important to keep that in mind. As he himself has explained, when in Sweden he would probably be put into isolation, in custody, and be facing a trial behind closed doors. So he was, there was also the threat of extradition from Sweden to the United States, especially months ago when there was a very heated debate in the States and heated words against Julian and the organization, borderlining hate speech, even incitement to murder. So the situation was very dire at that time.
Is that what he's worried about? A trial in Sweden will inevitably lead to extradition to the United States, perhaps to Guantanamo Bay or something of that nature? Is that the sort of fear?
That is one of the worries. And if you reflect back to what was being said by public figures and rather prominent figures in the States at the time, last fall, when the extradition demand came, it was a very justifiable reason for resisting.
But I have heard it said that you're more likely, or he'd be more likely, to be extradited from Britain under their laws than from Sweden under their laws. Isn't there a bigger fear of being extradited to the United States from Britain?
Well, I mean, this is something that was made under legal advice in Britain, so they advised him against from going to Sweden.
Why should it worry him facing trial behind closed doors in Sweden? It's not a kind of primitive backwater, it's a modern democracy with a well-functioning legal system.
Well, I don't want to discuss the details of the Swedish case. It is an upcoming hearing on that. But through the extradition hearing in London and through selective leaks out of Sweden from probably the police and the prosecution, there have been information that people can study on the internet and make up their own mind about the merit of the case. And there are a lot of things there that should raise an eyebrow.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's true that what constitutes sexual assault in Sweden probably would not constitute sexual assault in another place. But then again, if you're living in Sweden, you are subject to the laws of Sweden. That's the established principle, isn't it?
Well, the chain of events in Sweden last fall was very un-Swedish as well. It was very,